Marketer of the Day, number 452. Find your passion, grow a podcast, and monetize it using the Spreaker platform with podcaster Rob Greenlee. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to the Marketer of the Day podcast. Have you heard of blogtalkradio.com? And have you maybe heard of Spreaker.com? Well, you need to listen to our guest right now today. His name is Rob Greenlee, and he's the head of partnerships at Spreaker and at Blog Talk Radio. He's the former CTO at Podcast One. He worked on Microsoft's Xbox Live and Zune, and he currently hosts the SpreakerLiveShow.com podcast Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, and he co-hosts newmediashow.com/live. And Rob is going to tell us all the things that we need to know to start and grow and succeed with podcasting. So how are things today, Mr. Rob?
Great, Robert. It's great to be on your show. It's going to be a lot of fun. I love talking about podcasting. So it sounds like we're going to do a deep dive, which is fantastic.
Awesome. Yep, I'm all about the deep dive and the randomness, and maybe even packing so much into a show that maybe people have to listen 2 or 3 times. I always like to get more information than not enough. So, I mean, what's on your mind these days? What do people need to know about podcasting?
Well, so you're asking what's going on in the industry right now, just in a broad sense?
Yeah, just like what do you see coming your way as far as this stuff?
Oh, well, I see that the industry, the podcasting space itself, which has been around for, I guess, close to 14 years now, is growing right now at a pretty good size clip. There's a lot of new shows coming online. There's new listeners joining the listening side. So I think things are looking really, really positive right now in the industry itself. A lot of the advertising side of the industry seems to be and blossoming. There's more platforms starting to support podcasting. We're starting to see like people like Spotify and Pandora and some of these big listening platforms around music start to really jump into the podcasting space too. So this is a really exciting time for podcasting.
Super great. Yeah, it seems like over the years, it seems like there were a couple of false starts. Like it seems like people thought that podcasting would take off, and then it really didn't. And then a couple more years passed, and then at a certain point, it seems like podcasting became like the cool thing, and it seemed like I didn't have to explain to people anymore what a podcast was. They all knew what it was. They were all subscribed to these sorts of things. But then it seems almost like there's a lot of competition, or it seems like things are moving super fast, and sometimes I can't even keep up with, like you said, all these different platforms or these different ways to advertise or things people are doing. And so how do we just get to make sense of all this crazy stuff happening?
Yeah, I wanted to mention a little bit about what you were talking about, what the history was a little bit here. Let's talk about that a little bit. There was a lot of fluctuation in the perception of podcasting as you go back and you look over the last 10 years around the perception of the space. But if you look at the actual analytics of what was actually happening and what the consumption was and the content, it's been steadily growing. It just... During certain phases in the past of the history of this medium, the growth has been slower, but it's been steadily growing. And that's why today we're seeing a little bit more accelerated growth, but it's not growing like a hockey stick. It's growing at just a steady clip of I think like 10 years ago it was growing at like maybe 2 or 3% a year, where now we're seeing like 4 to 5% a year. So that's kind of where we're at with it. And really what's really accelerated a lot is the actual media focus on it, like the articles and the topics coming up in TV shows and podcasts being turned into TV shows. So you're seeing kind of this synergized effect of the growth of the medium based on the attention that it's getting. And I also believe that the social media craze that happened about the same time podcasting kicked off kind of took a lot of attention away from podcasting. And so people really got focused into YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. But what we've seen is the attention to those platforms start to wane. Podcasting is being looked at as something new and shiny that people can utilize to create deeper relationships with audiences. And I think that's why we're seeing the growth that we're seeing today, is because people are seeing it as an authentic and real way to connect with audiences. And a lot of marketers are starting to position their marketing towards building deep personal relationships with their customers, and podcasting rides along that trend line.
Oh yeah, I completely agree, and especially there's that, like, the rise of podcasting itself. There's the rise of social media, and at the same time, at least as far as what I've seen in my business, there's like that decline in email marketing, the decline in email deliverability. And I was, for a couple of years there, I was just sort of putting out the podcast every now and then when I felt like it. But then I really began taking it seriously and putting it out consistently a couple of years ago, when I noticed that there were some other marketers, and I'd be on their list, and I'd either their email would get filtered, or I just wouldn't see it, just with all the stuff in the email inbox. And a few of these marketers, I would even subscribe for a little while, but then while I was I would unsubscribe, sorry. So while I was unsubscribed from some of these marketers, I would continue listening to their podcasts, and even though I was completely off their list, I'd still buy some stuff from them, or I'd even sign back up to their list, and I would have been lost forever if it wasn't for that podcast of that person staying in my ear. So have you noticed this with yourself, like with the podcasts you've been putting out, or podcasts that you subscribe to? Anything similar on your end?
Yeah, I think people see this as a more of a connection with another person. I mean, it's almost like, a lot of analogies that I like to draw is that podcasting in its purest form. Now, granted, there's a full spectrum here, from very professional produced content all the way down to, shows like what we're doing right now, are very authentic conversations. They're very grassroots. They're very, they can be very informative. They can be actually contain a lot of value, and people like to share stories. And really at the core of this medium is all about telling stories and telling experiences and telling audiences and sharing, and the exchange of sharing and experiences is also a big part of podcasting. And I believe that's going to be part of the next big phase of podcasting. And I've been thinking a lot about this over the last few months, that the connection with the audience in this medium needs to get stronger, and that will propel this medium forward to a level that we haven't seen in media in the past. Because if you look at websites, sure, there's been a commenting that's happened, like in blogs and things like that, where you have threaded conversations where people connect, and I think that is a little bit of a sign of where podcasting, I believe, is going in the future, is that I think more and more shows are going to be deeper, more deeply connected with their audiences, and information exchange is going to be where the value happens. And I've seen this firsthand with the podcasting that I've done, is that sometimes the audience to your show is more knowledgeable than the host of the show. So getting that feedback from the audience and getting those questions and getting that contribution fuels the show and makes the show better for a lot of different show formats. And so I hope that kind of answers what you were kind of leading into.
Yeah, it starts to. And so now you have me curious, like, what do you see that looking like in a practical sense? So it's one thing to say, well, you see a lot of more interaction, but does that mean like more interviews, more of a call-in format, or more of a pre-launch to get the questions to ask on the interview, or pre-recorded segments? Or how do you see that new two-way communication manifesting?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen because you're going to see this convergence, and we're already starting to see the beginnings of it with these smart speakers that are out there that are going to be becoming more and more natural language type of platforms. And I believe that that this is really kind of a technology issue is what it is. It's not so much the content providers, or it's not necessarily focused on content, but what this is I believe the listening platforms need to do a much better job of building in tools into their listening experiences that enable audiences to more easily contribute to the show and give feedback and give audio comments, and to get it back to the producers of the program that then can make them available to their audiences as part of their productions, or at least link to them in the show notes, or have some deeper technology solution that enables more flowing of communication with audiences and contributions from the audience to the production and to the processes. And I think this smart speaker, natural language evolution on the technology side is going to enable me to, or any listener, to just verbally give that communication back through these speakers that are listening to everything that we're saying, and we can more easily do that. And I think that technology is going to be built into more and more of our devices, and I think listening to audio is going to be built into all of our devices going forward, because this audio side of what's happening here is becoming a very significant part of the natural user connection that we have with our computing experiences. And so I think podcasting is going to ride along that pathway.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it's kind of weird how it's almost like an old technology made new again, because you always think like, oh, isn't video the latest and greatest thing? But then I think of the times I go to find something on YouTube, I only have a couple of minutes. If I'm looking for something on YouTube, I'm looking to see how something works, or I'm looking for a quick tutorial. And then same goes if I'm reading or I'm looking something up, I'm usually just scrolling really quick through. But then when I'm listening to podcasting, it's like there's nothing else like it. I'm listening to it if I'm on a walk or I'm on a drive, or I just have it on in the background. And it's not like I have YouTube on in the background. It's not like I have some articles going on like Wikipedia in the background. So yeah, I definitely agree with you that this podcasting thing, it seems like it's found a really interesting space there as far as that long form content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of people that will push hard and say that your best pathway to success in podcasting is just to create a short audio program. But the truth of the matter is while that may be the case to a point, and I think it's really content dependent, but if you look at the actual data of what's successful in the podcasting space, it is typically longer form content. We're talking about 30 to 50 minute shows is the most common format that's gathering the most audiences today.
Interesting. And that goes against all the sort of doom and gloom we hear about on Facebook. People's attention span are limited and things like that. And so maybe on Facebook, but for that small group of people who really likes what we have to say, I'd rather put out the content my way. I'd rather say the stuff that I want to say and go on as long as I want to go on, so that they can kind of meet me where I'm at. And so I mean, we can get all crazy about this podcasting stuff, but where's a good starting point for people? Do you recommend that they make a podcast on Blog Talk Radio or on Spreaker, or how do people even just kind of get started, so that way when all this new podcasting technology comes out, we can just tap into it?
Well, I think that the big thing to think about, it's not so much the first thing you need to think about is what platform you want to put it on. I think just generally what you need to do is you need to think about topics that drive your passions. As a content creator or just as a human being, what's your career? What's your focus in your life? What gets you excited every morning to wake up and think about and work on? I think that's where you begin thinking about what you want to do with a podcast, is think about what's going to be motivating for you to keep a show going. What's the topic that you want to talk about every week? And podcasting is a marathon run. It's not a sprint. And you need to think about long term. If you want to be successful in podcasting, you need to think long term. It's not a short term thing. Reaching audiences is a time consuming process. And especially if you don't have a lot of money to put into it, you're going to have to grow it organically, which is going to take time and effort. Consistent effort. And so that would be the first thing. The second thing would be goal setting. It would be once you've identified what you're interested in talking about and that you feel like you have enough passion and you have enough knowledge to sustain every week doing a show about that topic, then start setting some goals. Come up with a name, come up with what you might want to do with your program, because there's lots of formats. There's lots of ways that you can produce a program. And think about how you want to produce it. How is it going to fit into your life? Think about where you would do it. I mean, I'm talking about physically. Where would you do it? In your clothes closet? Are you going to do it in your car? Are you going to do it in a bedroom? Where are you going to record this? Or are you going to do it on the road? I mean, I talk to podcasters every day that's one of the key questions that they need to ask at the beginning of this process is, where do they have time? Where does it fit into their life? When could they produce an episode? These are very logistical and practical questions, but they're ones that you need to get clear in your mind, because there are a lot of podcasters that get started with this because they don't think about those things. And then 9 or 10 episodes into their show, they wind up quitting because it doesn't fit into their life, or it gets hard, or they run out of things to talk about because they took on a topic that they weren't an expert in, or they didn't have enough passion about, and it waned. Because there are going to be times when you're going to think that you're speaking to an empty room, especially at the beginning. You're not going to have a huge audience at the beginning of your production. So there's lots of room to make mistakes at the beginning of your podcasting journey, because very few people are listening. But you need to think about how you can get the best show out there you can, so you can start building an audience, because the audience will be attracted to quality content, and especially content that's done by a person that has a lot of passion.
Awesome. I agree completely. And one of my favorite things to do is, if there's some podcast show that's been around a while, or some podcaster with a really slick music setup and all that, I like to go and find their very first episode or very first couple of episodes just to see how far they've come. Not to make fun of them, but just as that encouragement to me that, okay, it's better to get it rocking and rolling and starting, and you can do all the perfectionism kind of stuff later on. And so you mentioned that you see all these new shows getting started every day. You run these really great platforms, and I'm sure you must have seen like some really cool ideas or really cool formats for some of these podcasts. I mean, does anything like that come to mind?
You mean, well, I think the foundations are the basic. There's always like a new genre that's popping up, like I keep hearing about how musicals are coming to podcasting, and you had this free of our reality storytelling, and we have like murder dramas, and we've had all sorts of different theater of the mind kind of storytelling things that have been like subgenres that have started up in this medium, that have driven a fair amount of attention and quality content, which has been fantastic for the medium. But the core of this medium is independent podcasters. That's just guys like you and I that are just out there producing a show about a topic that they're passionate about. That's the foundation of this medium. And it's always been that way for the 13 or 14 years that it's been around. Sure, there's been a lot of big media companies that have gotten involved in this medium, NPR, CBS, ABC, I mean, all the big content networks out there are producing podcasts. But that is not the core, and that's not the vast majority of the content that's being produced. The vast majority of the content that's being produced by people like you and I. And that's where the majority of the listening is as well, believe it or not. I think a lot of people think that podcasting space is kind of like now owned by public radio, but it really, it's just a pimple on the back of an animal that's much bigger, because public radio has like maybe 500, 1,000 podcasts, but there's 350,000 podcasts, right? So there's probably there's many shows that don't even show up in the iTunes top 100 list that are much bigger than any of the public radio shows. It's just that they don't get a lot of attention, and that's the thing that I would make sure that everybody understood, is that there's a lot of attention being driven to the big media podcasts, but that's not the core of this medium. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that. That you as a podcast creator can build a big audience for the topic that you have. If you put a lot of energy and effort into it, it's possible, and it's being done every day. Because I talk to these guys, and a lot of them are making money with their podcasts. A lot of them are not making money, but a lot of them don't care if they make money because they're talking about stuff that they passionate about and they care about, and they're trying to help others learn, and they're learning from people that they have on their programs. Just like what we're doing right now, we're exchanging information about podcasting, not unlike what could be done around, if you're a doctor or if you're a lawyer or if you're an artist. There's an exchange of information that happens that can help both parties as well as the audience, and that's what this medium is all about.
Super great. And that's very reassuring that maybe we see a lot of the CNNs or like the Anderson Coopers or Adam Carolla or whoever, these big names, we see them a lot, but they're not the majority of that podcasting audience. And many times when I'm listening to a podcast, I'll just go on a walk and I'll type something in iTunes, like I'll look for, how to get more focus or how to end procrastination or how to get rid of anxiety or something, and I'll do that search, and I won't even really care what the show is. And if anything, I'm looking for a show that I haven't seen before, and many times I'll just want to hear someone else's take or try someone else out. So I completely agree. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned in there that it's really important that, well, first of all, we choose a name and a format and a place and all these things, so that way this fits into our life. That way we take it seriously. We have a real commitment. It's not just a hobby. It's not something that goes by the wayside. But then as we're building this podcast and being diligent about it, it's important that we build up traffic and find ways to monetize that podcast. So do you have any favorite methods of doing that? Any favorite ways of growing that podcast audience and making money from it?
Yeah, I mean, what you have to step back and realize is what the medium is all about, because once you have a good grasp of what the medium is and who's listening and how those listeners got to listen to any podcast, I think it drives a clear message on how to market your podcast. Podcasting is at the core a technology-related medium, right? It's built on the same principles that the World Wide Web was built on. It's around sharing. It's around people sharing links, search engine find. People are keyword searching for things. People are looking online for answers to questions, or they're looking online to further their passions or their particular interests. So you need to think about making sure your show is adequately programmed with a website and with keywords that are indexable by Google and all of the search engines. Google's the most important one, and then there's Bing, but Google's the most important one. So you need to make sure that your show is findable in the search engines, first of all. There's the next level, which is, how do people typically find podcasts? How do they learn about podcasts? Well, they typically learn from two different sources. To some degree, social media can be helpful here. Like Twitter allows you to share a tweet with an embed in it that will allow somebody to listen. But one of the downfalls of social media as a marketing tool is that people are very transitory through those platforms, which means that they typically don't spend a lot of time on any particular post that's made in that platform. That applies to Facebook as well. So you're going to get a limited amount of benefit from promoting your show on social platforms. Now, granted, you have to do it though, because one of the core principles of how people discover podcasting is also word of mouth. This is a word of mouth sharing medium, and it's one of the reasons that the medium grows relatively slowly, is because people will tell a friend, I listened to this great podcast, you should check it out. That is the glue that has made this medium grow over the last 13 years, is that word of mouth sharing. So in your marketing practices and how you promote your show, you need to facilitate word of mouth sharing as well as search engine discovery or keyword discovery, and use keywords that are important for your show, but also important to listeners to find your show. So if you focus on those type of things, and then also work with other media too. So if you can become an expert around your topic and build a reputation, and it's around having some, some online reputation, then you can potentially get on other people's podcasts, get on other people's radio shows, maybe get involved in doing TV segment guest spots. Maybe you write for a newspaper or a magazine or something like that to get your name out there and to get your expertise out there. And that's how you build your audience at a core level. So it really gets back to the basics. There's really nothing sexy going on here about how to build audience for a podcast. And then the whole monetization side, what you want to do, and this is kind of my advice, is there's kind of two ways that people go about this. There's hobbyists, like you had mentioned earlier, that will just start a show because they'll bring in a couple of their friends and they'll just do a show because they have fun doing it. And then there's the other side, which is guys that are a little more serious and want to build a business around this. And if you have the goal of wanting to build a business around your podcast and make money from it, then you need to approach it from that perspective. You need to approach it from the perspective that I'm going to run advertising in my show. Maybe I can't do it at the level that I want to at the beginning because I don't have enough listeners to reach that 5,000 or 10,000 audience level that a lot of advertisers are looking for. But I can certainly get involved in an affiliate program, whether it be Amazon affiliate program or going to Linkshare or one of these affiliate programs that are out there that you can sign up for to, talk about a particular product on your podcast and get a commission off of the sale of that. You can certainly get started with having those type of host read spots in your podcast very early in your process. And maybe you don't make much money from it, but what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for having that segment in your program. You've earmarked a location in your recordings where you're going to talk about a sponsor, because a lot of these advertisers, when you get up to the level of 5,000 or 10,000 audience level, they're going to want to go back and listen to your show and hear ads in your show. Before they're willing to run ads in your show, they want to know that you're already doing it and that you know how to do it. And you know how to do a host read. So these are about skill building, and building that skill about how to do ads in your podcast is just as important as actually getting those ads. So you have to be ready for advertisers. And the only way to get ready if you don't have advertisers is to get some sort of advertising that you can run in your show that's free, that you don't have to get a deal with an advertiser. You just go get an affiliate program, because then you can write your own ad. You can do your own host read for an affiliate program relationship, and that's easy to get. You can go out and get that tomorrow. It doesn't take pitching your show to an advertiser. You get that going right away. And that gets you in the mindset that you're running ads in your show. They can be short. They can be very quick. They can be very personalized. They can do it the way you want to do it. Because when you become that show that's at the 10,000, 50,000 audience level, you will be ready to take on that CPM campaign that will pay you $5,000 or $10,000 a month to run advertising in your show.
That is super powerful. And that's all that right in there. I mean, I hope that everyone listening maybe back up about 5 minutes and listen to that all over again, because there was so much good stuff in there, like a whole step-by-step plan. And that overcomes the problem that I hear from a lot of people where they don't even want to start podcasting because they're like, well, I'm already looking for how is it going to make money? I want to sell some sponsorship. And I try to say like, well, you have to get the show in place first. And that's super great. So in other words, get the show in place first and then do all of those things that have been proven to work that maybe aren't the sexiest, but have been proven to work over time, like keyword optimization, looking at where the traffic comes and look to multiply that, make sure that you're search engine ready, and then do all the other things like social marketing, tell a friends, hop on other people's podcasts as a guest, TV, guest blog posts, any which way you can to get that audience. And then as you're building the audience, don't go without ads, and don't just wait for some sponsor to come and find you. register for an affiliate program. That way you can have that spot in your show. That way there's a spot in the middle or the end or something, and you get good at being that radio announcer speaking out the ad. And then once you build the audience, now you can easily swap that out and switch it over and make a much smoother transition, as opposed to maybe playing the lottery and putting some stuff out there and crossing your fingers and hoping that someday it'll pay the bills. This is all very doable as far as getting some stuff going, and then when it outgrows that, say, 5,000 person audience, to switch to something else. When you get to the 10,000 person audience, to switch to something else. And so this is a really great plan, very doable. And I want to make sure before we wind down, before we let you go, that we hear all about Blog Talk Radio and Spreaker, because I've listened to a few other people's podcasts on Blog Talk Radio, but I don't think I have an account. I haven't published anything there. And then Spreaker, I keep hearing about this, and my understanding is that you can either host your own podcast there, or if we already have a podcast feed, we can somehow replicate the show over there, but I could be totally wrong. So could you tell us about some of these great platforms you have?
Yeah, well, I think that I'll probably start off with Spreaker first, because I'm probably more familiar with Spreaker because I spent 2.5 years working on the Spreaker platform and working with that team. It was just a recent acquisition or merger might be a better description of it, that we did with Blog Talk Radio. Both companies are very similar in kind of their tool set and what they do. Both are very robust podcast distribution platforms. The big difference, really, I think, between typically Spreaker and maybe other podcast hosts is that we do the basic podcast hosting stuff where we host an MP3 file and generate an RSS feed. But the other parts to the company is more from the content creation side and then the listening side. We have very robust listening apps for iOS and Android and even Windows Phone and on the web. So we have millions of people listening to content on our platform as well. Our apps are as good as Stitcher or as good as any of the leading podcast listening apps online today. But one of the differences in our platform is we support live too. So live shows can be produced on the Spreaker platform as well as on Blog Talk Radio and pushed into those apps. People can listen live. And that gets back a little bit to what we were talking about before about that audience connection and trying to get audiences involved in the shows. So live is a big part. Spreaker makes free software. It's called Spreaker Studio for desktop or Spreaker Studio for mobile. So you can get a little app that you can run on your Android or your iOS or your iPhone that you could produce your whole show right on your mobile device, and have the ability to play your intro music and exits and do your host reads and everything. You can do it live or you can record it. And then on the desktop on Windows or Mac, we have free software that's available off our website that you can get that you can incorporate Skype calls, kind of like what we're doing with this program. So you can, that's the software that I use to produce the Spreaker Live show every week. Is I take a call in via Skype. It comes into the software. I play the lead-in music. I can play any kind of sound effects or any kind of pre-recorded piece of content in the program itself while it's streaming live, or if I'm just recording it. And then I can play an exit track to leave it as well. And all can be done right through the software. I don't need a mixer. I just can plug in up to 4 USB microphones into my computer, like through maybe a USB hub, and it will go right into the software. It actually comes in separate tracks, but it gets recorded as one track. And then you can export it out of the software into, let's say you have a wave editor like Audacity or Audition or any of these wave editors, and you can do some editing on it and then publish it out as an episode, upload it to Spreaker or whatever platform that you're using, Blog Talk Radio, and publish it, and you're a podcast. So that's really the difference. We try and solve the complete problem of podcasting, from the creation, recording, live streaming to the listening side as well. And we've recently gotten into monetization tools. So we do have a program where you can sign up for automatic advertising insertion into your program. So we have relationships with ad agencies and ad networks that will funnel advertising into shows, into our platform. And you can sign up for that, and it will happen automatically with your show. You really don't have to do anything currently today. But we are working on a new platform in the Spreaker tool set that will enable mid-roll insertions, as well as being able to do host reads and be able to insert those into the programs as well. So we're feverishly working on monetization tools because we want to help advertisers reach podcasts, but we also want the podcasters to be able to make money off of their shows. That's a big phase that podcasting is in right now, is being able to earn some level of income for all your efforts creating quality content.
Super great. Yeah, I imagine once people start making money, or once people make more money with podcasting, or they make money easier, then it's easier for more and more businesses to show up. And having those hobby shows is great, but having like the real money making businesses, or even opening it up for anyone to have an idea for a podcast, put some stuff out, make money from it, really, I mean, sounds like a great service, as opposed to even a couple of years ago when you'd have to learn a bunch of programs and do a bunch of steps and things like that. I mean, being able to do it right there in the app and being able for the ads to be inserted automatically, I mean, feels like we're living in the future. And so is Spreaker only for new podcasters, or if we have an existing podcast, is there an easy way to either migrate or mirror that podcast on your platform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's fairly common in the right now is the ability to transfer shows between platforms. Most of the major platforms, I'm talking about like Blueberry and Libsyn and Podbean and a lot of the more popular podcast hosting platforms, have built in the ability for shows to be able to easily move and to do 301 redirects of their feeds, and to enable shows to move their source of their shows and not lose audience, right? So we support that as well. We have a feed importer tool that will enable you to take an existing RSS feed that's hosted by some other platform, be able to drop it into this tool. It's just basically as simple as cutting and pasting that feed address, that feed a URL into a little tool, a web tool on our platform. Basically sucks all the metadata out of that RSS feed, your descriptions, your publish dates, your links to your episodes. We capture the actual episodes themselves, and then we automatically recreate a new RSS feed in the Spreaker tools. So it takes like 5 minutes. Of course, it depends on how many episodes you have. It could probably take 10 or 15 minutes if you have a couple hundred episodes. But if you have just a few episodes, it probably takes like 5 minutes. And that's how easy it is. And then you would go back to the originating host platform, and you would set up what's called a 301 redirect, or a iTunes feed address change. You would set that up, and it would just redirect all that traffic over to your new feed. And then we have the same tools going the other way. So if you wanted to leave Spreaker or Block Talk Radio and go to some other platform, we set up that same kind of redirect functionality. So we're creating the whole industry has created a free flow, typically, of people being able to move between platforms easily and not lose audience. And I think it's been really, really important that the industry cooperate like this. Now, though there's still some players in the industry that make it more difficult to do that than others, because they're trying to lock you into hosting there. And there are a few big players that kind of make that more difficult to do. But most of the ones that have been around a long time, the podcast hosting platforms, have learned that they need to offer that, because if they don't, they're going to get hammered by the podcaster. They're going to get those customer service emails going, why can't I transfer my feed over to where I want to move to? And if you don't support that, you're going to get a black eye in the industry.
Right. It seems like a kind of an outdated way of thinking. The old way of thinking is, let me just let everyone import to me and they're stuck with me. But the new way of thinking is to be more portable and kind of have that two-way migration where they can move all their stuff onto me. But if they want to move somewhere else, then we allow them that option as well. Yeah. Cool. And so if people like what they're hearing, they like our conversation today, where should they go? Should they just go to Spreaker.com or some other place?
Yeah, I mean, go to Spreaker.com and just explore the website. Go listen to some podcasts on that platform. The listening is right on the front page. You can dive right into a genre and go find a couple of shows that are in your genre of what you want to create as a show, and check out how people have set up their show. I mean, if you wanted to check out the show that I've created on the Spreaker platform, the Spreaker Live Show, just go to SpreakerLiveShow.com and you can see a terrific example of what can be set up on the platform that has all the bells and whistles. We also enable you to create your own custom apps for your show as well for iOS and Android, and the Spreaker Live Show has that as well. You can go to the app stores on iOS or Android and check out those apps. They're free, and see how they function. They're real fairly basic listening apps that look very attractive and are easy to use, and that's really important to us. And we recently ported over all of our shows that are on the Spreaker platform over to the new the Amazon the Echo, the speaker platform. I didn't want to say what the name of the service was, because if you're listening to this and you have one of these things sitting on your desk, it could be activated. So the name of it begins with an A, but it's the smart speakers. So we've started to support those smart speaker platforms as a default for all shows on the Spreaker platform. So.
Fantastic. So staying on the cutting edge. I really like that idea that you mentioned there of looking at other shows similar to what you have in mind and playing around with the iOS and Android apps they have, because you mentioned goal setting earlier, and it helps you really see what the finish line is, because it seems like with some of this stuff, it's really easy to get overwhelmed with all the possibilities, or say, well, I'm different, I'm unique. But then if we see what someone else has done, if they blazed the trail before us, it gives us a really good idea of where we're going, what we need to do, and gives us some like encouragement, motivation, ideas that we wouldn't have otherwise had. So really great advice. And everyone, make sure to go to Spreaker.com to check out that platform. And then to see what an excellent live show looks like, go to SpreakerLiveShow.com. And when should they and when can they tune in to check that one out live? That's Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, right?
Correct. Yes, that's the best time. I also do another show called the New Media Show, and that's on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. and that's at newmediashow.com.
Perfect. So if you're listening at work, you got the weekday show, and if you're listening when you're off work, you have the weekend show for whatever purposes you have there. So great stuff. So Spreaker.com and SpreakerLiveShow.com. We'll see you there in both places. And thanks so much, Rob, for stopping by and sharing some of this great advice for us about podcasting.
All right, Robert, it was great to be on your show. Thank you.
Please subscribe, rate, and review our show at marketeroftheday.com/iTunes, and like us on Facebook at marketeroftheday.com.